It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Welcome back. You're tuned into your Feel Good Breakfast Show Expresso right here on SABC3. So good to be hanging out with you. It's your Wednesday morning, middle of the week, sailing down to the weekend. We love it. Right now, though, as adults, we are better equipped to make the right friendship choices than children are, naturally. But, and as a parent, it can also be tempting to want to shield your child from making the wrong choices and instead choosing for them. But the big question is, should parents get involved in their child's friends and with their child's relationship with their friends? So we are joined in studio by registered occupational therapist Nasreen Cariem to talk about this very important topic, helping us parents out. Nasreen, lovely to have you back. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
This is an interesting subject because I don't know really what to do with this. With my boys growing up now, my youngest being, he's turning 6 now, you know, he's got his friends and he talk about his friends. But is that the thing? Should parents really get involved in those friendships?
Well, I think it is actually important, especially like you're mentioning age 6. You know, it's very important for parents to get involved, as these are the first relationships that your child would actually make. And from that very first interaction, you know, with another kid, they're actually getting to learn that social skills, they're getting to learn about sharing, they're getting to learn about all those little concepts such as empathy, if the one child gets upset, and we need to actually teach them what it's like to put yourself in their shoes as well. So it is actually very important, especially because it's their first friendships that they're making, and they do need guidance.
Yeah,
they do.
Absolutely. Now, I need to also ask you this. Now, you have your boy or your girl, you take them to school, but you notice that there's a particular friend maybe that's a bit of a negative influence on your child. You can see your child's behavior starting to change a little bit.
Yeah.
How do you approach that? Because it's not as if you can just take your kid out of school or, you know, they have to still be in the same vicinity. So what do you do as a parent?
Well, always, that will always be the telltale sign of completely changed behavior in a child that you know is not typical to them.
Yeah.
It's always important not to always assume that it is the other friend. It's always important to be neutral. And I always feel it's always nice for parents to get to know the parents of the other child as well. You know, when it comes to play dates, have the child over for a play date, get to know the family as well. And if there is a negative behavior, to actually maybe in a very nice, diplomatic way, you know, address it.
Ooh, it can get so awkward, though.
It can get very awkward, but that's what's always important, to be very neutral about it, because sometimes it actually might be your child.
That's the thing, yeah.
So it's very important to actually look at what's happening on both sides, or maybe the other child's actually going through a very difficult emotional time in their life. So
and you have to approach it on such a gentle way, because at the end of the day, it's your kids that needs to deal with it. Because if you're going to have a bit of a row with the friend's parents, and then they're going to, and then things are going to be said between the kids, it's a mess. So you really have to be very, very diplomatic, like you were saying.
Yeah.
What are some of the life skills that you think that you should teach your child from a very young age to be able to deal with these things? You know, to be able to recognize, you know, when maybe a particular individual is not the greatest influence on them.
I think it's very important to obviously teach them about, you know, having a certain standard of what's right and what's wrong, what's appropriate and what's not appropriate. For example, it's not appropriate to hit the other child.
Yeah.
You know, those basic things. And also very important to teach them the concept of sharing and empathy, as well as assertiveness.
Yeah.
If in case they're being hit or anything like that, to actually teach them to be able to stand up for themselves.
Yeah. Absolutely. And you know what, that is why being a parent is so important. But it comes down to parents modeling behavior as well.
Absolutely.
To see that how we interact with people around us, you know, whether that be in the shopping center or wherever else. So I think that's very important. Nasreen, thank you very much for joining us this morning. We are not done yet. We still have a load to unpack. We're going to be back with Nasreen a little bit later on this morning.
It's my feel-good breakfast show.
Now, we are turning our attention back to parenting on your Wednesday morning. Now, earlier we spoke about whether or not parents should get involved in their child's friendships, but we're continuing that conversation right now with occupational therapist Nasreen Cariem. Nasreen, thank you once again for joining us. Hope you've been sorted out by Princess with some coffees and hot chocolates.
I've had the most amazing cappuccino, so totally sorted.
Good, good. So that's how we like to wake up.
Yeah.
So let's continue this conversation. We spoke about the fact that, yes, parents should intervene, but there's a specific way that you should go about it. But let's say you take a step as a parent, you intervene. In what way can that be bad for your child and the scenario that he has to work in?
I think it's very important to teach your child about conflict resolution at an early age. So instead of you fighting his battles for him, you've got to teach him about actually asserting himself and confronting the situation by himself. Otherwise, he might get used to you actually fighting his battles, and
Yeah.
that will lead to an early expectation of always doing that.
So let's say that your child has befriended somebody that's maybe not the best influence, a bit of a negative influence, and you can start seeing a couple of things happening with your child, maybe taking on certain behaviors that they not usually do. How should you go about it? Because should you leave it a little bit? Why is it important to maybe leave it and let the child do his or her thing?
I think it's important for a child to actually acquire their own development as well. And when you do see a different behavior, maybe it could just be a phase, maybe they are just imitating what they are seeing. It's always important to model the right behavior for them. And also not to actually necessarily badmouth the friend to your child, but rather say, ask him questions like, do you think that that is the right thing to do? So just remember that because he's doing it doesn't mean that you have to be doing it.
Exactly.
That type of thing,
But I mean, when it comes to behavioral change, that's where I think parents should intervene and step in and do something. But if you could, off the top of your head, a couple of scenarios, where parents should be like, yeah, no, that's okay. They should sort it out. What would a scenario like that look like?
Well, it's always, if it's a small little scenario where it's just a little fight over a toy, or it's just a tiny little battle, it's always important to just let them be. Because kids will always argue and fight with each other. They'll always be competitive with each other. So it's always important to just let them fight it out on their own. But once it becomes, we're harmful to the other one, where it is actually getting out of hand, I think at that point a parent could intervene because we don't want any hectic consequences to happen after that.
Absolutely.
To the kids,
Absolutely, and especially like they're young, but it's incredible how you see it already develop from an early age. I mean, I was mentioning earlier, my boy is turning 6 now only, but already fostering those relationship with friends, and you're taking on certain things, behaviors, and copying and saying different things as well. Final words of advice, Nasreen, just for our parents, to wrap this topic up, should we intervene with our child's friendships?
I think at the beginning, it's always important to give them some space to help them acquire their own sense of self-esteem, their own sense of autonomy in making decisions, and being able to be their own judge of character when it comes to meeting friends. And then also very important to actually be the example, lead by example rather. And for example, sometimes when you see road rage happening, you often see that there's a child sitting next to the one who's actually. So it's always important to make sure that you are setting an example for your child.
Exactly.
And by doing that, automatically you are teaching them how to actually interact with others.
It starts with you as a parent. Thank you very much. You also quickly gave us a picture that you sent. Is this some of the kids that you work with?
Yes, it is. They are all most likely watching from the home now. And
so you can say hello
so I
right
can
there. Say hello.
Hey, everybody.
Awesome.
So I think they've been waiting for this picture, so they'll be very happy to see it now.
Well, there you guys are. You guys are.
So this is just for you guys, eh?
Oh, sweet, man. Nasreen, thank you very much for joining us this morning, giving some very, very important advice. So go out there. You've heard what she said. Make sure that you give them a little bit of space, but when necessary, step in and take action.